Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this edition of Tough Talking Thursday. My name is Dennis Jai, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In this edition of Tough Talking Thursday, I'm focused on Liberia. We're going to be looking at our elections, that is the 2023 elections. The National Elections Commission has released the timetable for the elections, and we're going to be looking at this timetable. How realistic is the NEC timetable for elections? With me to discuss this, I have FOL Chief Political Analyst. Talking tough tonight is Mr. Wilmot Wetty Cooney. Mr. Cooney, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dennis. Happy to be here.
I also want to welcome our governance consultant, Ahmed Salif. Mr. Ahmed Salif is dressed in his Bopolu form. I don't know whether he's going to run in Bopolu or in Bapolu or Kipma. Mr. Salif, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, Dennis. I'm looking forward to it.
Also want to welcome Mr. Mohammed Sharif, a product of Waplo Institute from Kilipo, Kamyeke. He is FOL political analyst. Mr. Sharif, welcome to the show.
Dennis, thank you so much. It's always good to be here.
We will soon be joined by Madam Edith Gonglo Ware, who is going to be joining us tonight. Later on, she is running a little late due to a busy schedule. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show. I want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. Tonight, we're going to be talking tough on the elections scheduled for October 10, 2023. As you may be aware, the timetable was released. Elections. Our country is looking forward to elections 2023. So FOL has decided to go through a series on the elections because this is very important. And we're going to go into that. It's very important that we look at the elections to assess our preparedness and to analyze what all needs to take place for us to have a smooth, fair, and transparent election, also free. Before we start, I'm going to go around the room because sometimes I don't want to belabor the point, but the concept of election. Why are we talking about elections and why do we think that the road to elections or the road to 2023 is something that we need to discuss? Why is the holding of free, fair, transparent election very vital to our democracy? And what happens if this thing is not done right? We just have the timetable we're going to be looking at. So before we even begin the show on the timetable, let's go around the room and talk about elections. Mr. Sharif, someone watching us say elections is all the way October 2023. Why do we need to talk about elections now?
Once again, thank you, Dennis, and thanks for another week's edition of Tough Talking Thursday. It is very important. Election is the lifeblood of our democracy. So, and the frequency of it is a way of us holding our elected leaders accountable. So we've had Liberia is not a young democracy. So if you will indulge, and when we go down memory lane, the nation actually, independent Liberia, started with elections. There was two-party system, something that elaborated on this platform. J.J. Roberts won the first election in 1847. J.J. Roberts' Republican Party initially was not called the Republican Party, but J.J. Roberts' party later on became the Republican Party, which had early successes in Liberian history. Dennis, when we talk about elections, we cannot go through all of them, but there have been some very important elections in Liberian history that I would like our viewers to kind of understand. And what were those elections? So I want to take the election of 1847. That was the beginning of our post, if you call it that, independent election with J.J. Roberts defeated Samuel Benedict in 1847. Another important election in the 1800s was the election of 1867. Why is that important? Because this is the first time an incumbent president was defeated. Um, President Daniel B. Warner was defeated by James Spriggs Payne in the election in the Republican primary. So the challenger took on the president and beat the president in the Republican primary. So James Spriggs Payne went on to become president after he defeated E.J. Roy in the election of 1867. There was another election, which is very important, the election of 1869, when E.J. Roy came back and defeated James Spriggs Payne. This was the beginning of the TWP, the True Whig Party, winning elections. Then there was the election of 1877. Uh, Jim Spriggs Payne, his second stint. This time he was defeated. He was the incumbent, and he was defeated by Anthony W. Gardner. And of course, the election of 1927 is important because it was very fraudulent. Liberia made the Guinness Book of Records because of the election of 1927. Then there was the election of 1985. That was very, very controversial. That many believe was marked by fraud, and of course we know what happened after 1985. And of course, I will add to that the election of 2005. For the first time, a woman was elected president of Liberia, and so those are some of the very important elections in Liberian history. So it is very important for us as Liberians to be talking about elections because we've, in our history, have had elections. And one of the things that I want to mention quickly is that there has been only 3 times that an incumbent, right, has been defeated. I mentioned Anthony W. Gardner, and twice James Spriggs Payne was defeated. So history is on the side of George Weah when it comes to incumbent holding offices. So in the 175-year history of Liberia, incumbents have managed to hold on to their offices, whether by hook or crook, as you saw, as we've read in 1927, what happened in 1927. Some of them have been fair, some have not been. So for the most part, incumbents have gone on to hold on to their offices. So history is on the side of George Weah in this instance.
Thank you. Mr. Salif, why, again, the same question, why are we talking about election? And you may note that with just a little over a year to go in elections, we see that not many people are talking about elections because we are going to elections that, and we're going to come to the timetable, but not many people are talking about it. Tell me the link to free, fair, democratic elections to our democracy. People may think that that's simple, right? But tell me why that is important for our democracy, the holding of elections, and why is it that not many people talking about it?
Right. So many people should be talking about it. But what you're talking about in terms of not many people talking about the 2023 election, the electoral cycles and campaignings and electoral activities. So there are periods, even here in the U.S., after Labor Day, for instance, with the midterm, that's when electors and citizens begin to pay attention. So there are periods where citizens will begin to pay attention, particularly in a society like ours. With the rainy season and with abject poverty, frankly, people are more focused on survival, on meeting the immediate needs. But let's come to elections. So what are elections and why are they important? And in our particular context in Liberia, elections are the bedrock, like Mohammed said, this is the exemplification of the mandate of the people. So first of all, in a democracy, you select leaders by electing them. You select leaders by exacting the will of the people. And how do you get the will of the people? You have to go out and seek their mandate and explain your programs. Tell them about your policy, why you're better, you'll be better than the other person. And so, on a very basic level, Elections are how we are team leaders, are team mandate to govern. On another level, elections are what determines the quality of governance, the quality of leaders, political leaders, and by political leaders, I mean elected officials now who are running the country, are running, different constituencies and are helping the executives to govern. So, of course, by all measures, elections are very, very important. If not for anything, elections are the manifestation of democracy, the exercise of free will. The elections determine, how resources are apportioned and how resources are managed, who has the authority to do so, who has the authority to invite other citizens to form a government, to govern the country. And so, yeah, elections are very, very essential. In sub-Saharan African context, specifically in our Liberian context, I have to say, like Mohammed has laid out some of the historical backgrounds of Liberian elections. We've come to elections usually from different perspectives and approach elections in different ways. Oftentimes, African countries and African democracies, and I put democracies in air quotes there, I view as not really having the ability or even the will, the so-called political will, to conduct and exercise free, fair, transparent elections. It's very, very important for an election to be a free expression of the will of the people, the absolute total will of the people, that who gets elected was actually truly the one or ones who were elected by the will of the people, not through some manipulation or some machination of sort. So later on in the show, hopefully we'll have an opportunity to delve into some of the variables to define elections and different elements of elections. But in order for an election to be free and fair, the various variables to look at, and each of those variables, we're seeing some of them for a play in front of us in our Liberian context with the timetable you just showed, for example.
Thank you. Mr. Kune, we've seen elections. Let's look at our post-conflict election 2005 to now. What is different about 2023 elections, and why is it that we need to pay attention to make sure that things are free, fair, on time, and transparent?
Well, thank you, Dennis. First of all, I want to give a big shout out to my two colleagues here for their input. Mohammed did a very good, provided an excellent historical analysis of elections, and Ahmed, also added some substantive points to that. With regard to your question, the election that is coming from 2005 to this point, the 2023 election will be a consequential election, maybe for one or two reasons. It will solidify our march towards democracy, or if it is done correctly, it will solidify our march towards democracy. And if it is not done correctly, it could spell doom for the democratic process that we now have. We need to talk about it, and we are talking about it because it's important. I have not participated in national elections, but if I go by my experiences in participating in these community national organization elections, then as you realize that even people that put themselves forward for leadership do not understand the roadmap leading to the election. All people settle for is they want the election day to come for them to participate. People do not understand, the processes. They don't understand the procedures. So I think FOL is on point for us to enlighten our people on the roadmap that will lead to the election. I mean, election dispute resolution process, all of these things. And we need to highlight them. The election coming 2023, I think, going to be a little bit different in some fundamental ways. I know people talk about the previous election, but I think this is the first election after 2005 that may have very few candidates. Uh, Unlike the previous elections where presidential candidates was like 2022. And on the basis of that, it is completely possible that a candidate can pull a first round victory. We need to prepare the population with this scenario because the previous election we've had have been 22 candidates, and then we've been having two prominent politicians that have been presiding over two counties. And because of their participation in the election, the vote in that county was always like in some bag, uh, creating the difficulty for somebody to reach to the 50 plus one in the first round of the election. But we may not have that. Senator Prince Johnson will not be on a ballot for Nima County. And of course, Grand Bassa County doesn't have a political leader in the person of the late Charles Bromsking. So you got Grand Bassa and Nimba County that are up, for grabs, perhaps in the first round. So we need to educate our people on these scenarios because sometimes we get stuck in it. Oh, that thing never happened before, so it can't happen. No, not that something has never happened before, so it can't happen. But we need to look at the variables. We need to look at the circumstances. That yes, this may not have happened in the last 2-3 elections, but look at the variables that are changing, the changing variables. 5 candidates as opposed to 22. You have a situation where you don't have a single candidate now that is dominant in 2 counties that always sucking out the first round vote. But most importantly, the process need to be explained. The roadmap need to be explained. I'm a little bit skeptical, not about us meeting the roadmap, but of some of the things that have been introduced. I hope we're discussing here. We're talking about
and we'll get to
some of the things that have been introduced. Though there where my skepticism is, but with regard to the roadmap, everybody knew that 2023 would be elections. So the timetable seemed reasonable, but some of the new inventions and the new technology that has been introduced that we will examine here, I'm a little bit skeptical whether it will advance the process or it will make the process a little bit more chaotic.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you just joining us, this is Focus on Liberal Tough Talking Thursday. We are discussing the election, starting with the timetable. Before we get to the timetable, I want to ask this question to all of you. What are those things that need to happen for the conduct of a very free, fair, and transparent elections? And I know, we need to have a roadmap, but what are those things? And based on that, we can have an idea that the sooner the better. Let me put it that way. Let me start with Mr. Salih for at least 2 minutes each. Let's look at those things that must happen, those things that are the ingredients, those things that we all need to see. Because Mr. Kunis said something very important. Like we all are looking at the elections, and we are all everybody talking about running. Oh, I want to run. I'm going to Liberia to run. Oh, I have my candidate. I want to get this. But what are those things that must take place first? I mean, yes, it reminds me of Nigeria. Nigeria was supposed to meet Denmark first before Brazil, but they were thinking about Brazil so much in the in the World Cup, and then Denmark put them out. So we are so aimed at October 10, and then maybe we are forgetting those things that must happen before October 10. Mr. Salih, walk me through some of those things.
Well, thank you. That is a very, very good question. There are a number of fundamental mechanisms that ought to be in place and infrastructure that ought to be in place. A number of systems that ought to be in place, people who ought to be in place, a legal framework that ought to be in place. So, for example, when you look at sometimes I like to go academic a little bit on these things. You look in the literature when you look at electoral politics and campaign politics, right? So they talk about electoral management body. Now we may not think about it in that light because we have the National Elections Commission, which is our EMB, our electoral management body. But that is really a major institution, a major system that every country has in place and ought to ensure that the electoral management body is in place. That electoral management body ought to have a a framework, a structure. It ought to be structured in such a way that, like Mr. Connie alluded to, conflict, so that that body is efficient and it's effective. In our case, it's a board. We have a board of commissioners, right? And you have one who chairs that commission, so that if it comes to voting, or it comes to them making decisions, they're able to resolve differences and look at data and move forward. Then you have the technical people who work with that electoral management body. And then you have to have funding in place, adequate funding. Whether the fund comes from the government, and it should come from the government. Usually there's public funds, there's electoral finance, that's in place, set up by the legal framework. In our case, our new election laws of Liberia, right? You hear references to that. That is really, and these are United Nations standards, basically, right? So we have a legal framework that says, well, here are the stipulations for an election to be conducted that is consistent with the tenets of democracy and rule of law, right? You have to, candidates have to have opportunities to campaign. Candidates have to have opportunities to fund and not be outfunded or whatever. It talks about campaign finance. It talks about all the stipulations, dispute resolution mechanism, how to go to the electoral management body, and how it gets to the court system if it came to that. So that framework ought to be in place. Then you have the electoral workers, who with that EMB then have to conduct voter registration. You have to have a voter roll. That this voter roll should be verified enough to be exactly very consistent with the number of people who register to vote. That legitimately can be verifiable that these people register to vote. On the infrastructure side, you want to be able to have precincts. You want to be able to have sort of electoral magistrate and system put in place, so that you can come from the precinct level to a secondary level, to a national level, where data can travel quickly on election day. So before you get to election day, Dennis, there are all kinds of things that lead to campaigning, that lead to free press and access to the press, access to people, and essentially laying what I call an equal playing field, so to speak, so that everybody has an equal opportunity to compete for a vote and make their case to the Liberian people.
Mr. Cooney, give me more.
Yeah, Agma, I think did a great job. Part of the thing also that voters education. Voters education. The voters will have to be have to have considerable knowledge of the electoral process, how to vote, where are the location of voting precincts. All of these things are important in the process, and campaigning. All of these things are important in the process. How information get to voters, and specifically for our system, which is fragile, Dennis, I think the way, in addition to all of the factors that have been mentioned here, the way we campaign and what we say on campaign will be very crucial as we go forward. The evidence we have here, for example, in the United States, is Mr. Trump, who has successfully convinced about 75 million Americans that the election that he lost is a fake election, that he still won the election. And there are people that believe that. So we have to be cognizant of all of these things, because at the end of the day, if the election doesn't generate peace for our country, if the result of the election doesn't unify the country, then we are heading for trouble. But these are some of the landmines that we all have to flag as citizens of Liberia. What is the communication mechanism? What are we communicating to voters? I mean, it is good for you to project confidence, but I think it would be terribly wrong to project that the only result that can come from the election is your victory, because election got two results: either you win or you lose. So we have to be very careful, especially for Liberia, in our own circumstances. So yeah, the infrastructure, the legal system, the framework, all of those things are part of the process. But again, voter education, voter expectation,
Correct.
managing candidate participation. All of these things would be very, very crucial as we move to 2023.
Thank you. Let me go to Mr. Sherry. Mr. Sherry, on top of everything that Mr. Cooney and Mr. Salif said, I know you can add more. My question also to you is what role, because it's very easy for us to look at the NEC, the National Election Commission, when it comes to having all those things in place. But even we as media people, we also have a role. So tell me about all those things that need to happen and the role each of us have to play: civil service organization, the
Yeah.
government,
Yeah.
election commission, the student body,
Yeah.
everybody else, citizens. What do we need to do?
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. One of the underestimated institution, I think, in every election, when we speak within our context, is the National Election Commission. The National Elections Commission is very, very important. Back in time when it all started, the Liberian elections were being run by the Secretary of State that we call today the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So the Secretary of State ran these elections, and the ballot boxes from outlying areas were being transported on foot. And so there was a day assigned where these ballots would be counted before the legislature. So the legislature at that time actually was working. They were doing work. It's not like our legislatures now that are so rubber stamped, right? So, like I said, the election commission is very underestimated. Election commission's role in the conduct of elections, in the conduct, in upholding our democracy, and upholding the stability of the country is very key. We've had situations where ballots had to be counted twice, right? So in 1985, after the first round of counting, and then under some kind of pressure, whatever happened for some unexplained reasons, the ballot had to be Emmett Harmon and his commission was sequestered somewhere where they had to do this sort of second count. There was no need for that. If you're talking about a transparent election, then there's something happened this week, and it happened far, far, far off in East Africa. In Kenya, the Kenyan election was just held, and William Ruto beat the favorite Odinga. I think that's his name. Raila Odinga. William Ruto beat Odinga. Odinga was supported by the outgoing president, who was Ruto's boss. It's like in Liberia where you had Ellen Johnson supported, George Weah instead of, Boakai. But this time in Kenya, the script didn't flip. The vice president actually won, and Mr. Rudo, in his acceptance speech, in his victory speech, said that he has not spoken to his boss in months. So he worked with this man for years, and now they're not even on talking terms. But one of the things that he did say that was very striking to me was that the heroes, the champions, the true champions of this election are the members of the elections commission. Think about that, because they had, right, the audacity to say that this is the winner of the election and we still by it. And you know what happened? They went to the Supreme Court. The defeated candidate went to the Supreme Court. Mr. Odinga went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld the decision of the Kenya National Elections Commission. So this is the kind of thing that we're looking for. So in Liberia, there should be no doubt on that day in 2023 when the result is announced that it can hold anywhere you go. The problem with us is that there have been situations where we began to doubt the sincerity and the fairness of our elections commission.
Right.
So anytime you have doubt creeping into the elections commission, that's going to lead up to so many different challenges. And I think that we underestimate the election commission itself. I don't know if they know that, but the stability of the nation depends on the elections commission when
And,
it
and
comes
Mr.
to
Sherry, I agree with you there. but we also have a role to play, like even the way we report about these things,
Yes.
right? The
Yeah.
language that we use has media people,
So
civil
then,
society organizations, the community-based organization. Everybody has a role. Yeah, and your thought that's I may want to come in.
Yeah. So the media does have a role, a very important role to play in the election. Some of the things that we're doing now. How many times do you see the media coverage on elections, on holding the commissions accountable, on voter education, for instance? Ahmed mentioned this, but this is the time now that the media can play that critical role of civic education, right? As sort of the voice of the people, but we don't see that. So that has to happen. So even though what I was saying is that you don't see that in the civil society or even the opposition, you don't see that. But it is a work of it should be the work of the election commission to do that over and over again in the lead up to 2023. And lastly, Dennis, another thing that's not happening is that the Elections Commission of the Republic of Liberia is sitting there thinking that the only thing they can do is to just conduct elections. That's not the only thing. There's an election law. Liberia actually has a very good election law that create right this sort of level playing field for all political parties, all political participants, but no one is being held accountable. For instance, the incumbent cannot continue to use resources in the manner in which you're using the resources without some type of accountability. But how many times have we seen the election commission ever take issues with the incumbent for the way that they are spending enormously the national resources? So all of this under the election law is criminal if the election commission was holding everybody accountable, but they are not doing that, and that is a problem in the lead up to 2023.
Thank you. Quickly, Mr. Saleh. Then
Yeah,
we
I
can
just
move to
wanted, so Mohammed mentioned the role of institutions, and I 100% agree. In the Kenyan example, however, though, there were four commissioners of the IEBC, the Independent Electoral and Boundary Commission, that disagree with the result. They walked away. They held a press conference that the chair of the electoral body, the chair of the election commission, basically rounded some numbers up, and they didn't agree outside of the general meeting of all of the commissioners. And so these four commissioners had a press conference and had a disagreement. They disagree with the result that the chair announced. That was one of the bases on which Raila Odinga went to court. I think it was the Supreme Court, the Kenyan Supreme Court, yet again stood up and said, last time there are no results, they had to rerun the election. This time around, they didn't do that. It was just a very astonishing to that kind of ruling that all 9 counts of the opposition's point as the basis of filing and disputing the result of the election unanimously. All the justices of the Kenyan Supreme Court agreed that the Ruto won the election essentially, and there was no basis for a rerun of the election, dismissing essentially Raila Odinga's prayer to the court. And so, yes, the Electoral Commission, in our case, the National Elections Commission, of course, it will be an understatement to try to state how important that commission is. But there are times when the commission has the dispute, they disagree, and that's fine. If disagreement, if the data is there to back people up, as long as you have strong institutions can withstand the pressure and the shock. Hopefully, we don't resort to violence, and that is what happened in the case of Kenya. Everybody was holding their breath, but thankfully they didn't go to violence, and the court said Ruto won, and he's going to be president.
Thank you. Like how when they say, "Oh, well, there may
Quick
be
addition.
something, but it is not enough to overturn it." Let me welcome Madam Edith Gonglo Ware, who is also joining us from the city of Brotherly Love. Madam Gonglo Ware, welcome to the show.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for having me. And guys, I am so sorry for coming this late. I was just being a mother and a woman with multiple tasks, so it was just one of those days. But I'm glad to be here, however late.
Thank you for coming. Mr. Kunit, 30 seconds and then we go to Edith.
Yeah, the Kenyan election is kind of instructive, in many ways, especially given the ruling of the Kenyan Supreme Court, which is something similar to the ruling of the Liberian Supreme Court in the 2017 election. That look, uh, there are, elections are held, and like most things, there will be problem associated with the election. You will find one or two problems here uh, with the election. I think the standard for overturning most elections is that the fraud will have to be so massive that it
Yeah,
will render the result invalid. So yes, sometimes there may be credible fraud maybe at one polling station or something that didn't go right, but I think the court used the weight of the evidence to,
right.
to, to determine as to whether this was so substantial to overturn the vote of the people. So I think that the Liberian Supreme Court ruled that way, and I saw the Kenyan Supreme Court also ruling that way. And this is also part of the message that politicians and political parties will have to communicate that we don't have perfect election. We have free and fair election. That is the standard. Because if you go perfect, something will go wrong. A polling station may not open on time. Somebody may go to vote and maybe their name not there, you know. But this thing will have to be systemic. It have to
Yeah.
be so pervasive in the system for an election to be overturned. But sometimes in
Thank you.
Liberia, we just cherry pick these things and then we amplify it into a big fraud, and we demanding the election to be canceled. Not only in Liberia, but even in
Always
our
counted.
various communities. That's what we do. This is why you see many Liberian organizations, they all split, they all divided on these community elections.
Thank you. And I always wonder about that threshold that it is not plenty enough, or it is not massive enough, or it's not bad enough. One person who had an experience with that is Madam Ide Gonglo, where she was at the Supreme Court. And I don't want us to go too much in the Kenyan elections, but always, because these things that we are talking today, if they are not done correctly, then we come to the point of saying, well, you don't meet the threshold of fraud, or you don't meet the threshold of vote rigging. So to overturn it. I think, and that's why it's important. Madam Gonglowe, I want to give you the opportunity also to address the question we started with, that why do we need to talk about elections business this time, and why is election business so important to our democracy in the case of Liberia as we go to 2023? Please unmute yourself.
Unmute myself here, please.
All right, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Oh God. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. I listened partially from the beginning, and I listened to Mohammed with the history of elections in Liberia, dating back from the 1800s. And so, with that historical perspective, the only disagreement or concern, not necessarily disagreement, that I had was the statement that our democracy is old. Liberia has a very young democracy. If we define what the meaning of democracy is, you will see that we have a very young democracy. We are not as old as we may think. But let me go to why we should talk about the election and the processes.
Madam Gongowa, before you continue, I just want to point out to you that I agree with Mohammed on that one. I wrote an article maybe like 10, 15 years ago that liberal democracy is not young. But go ahead. I just wanted to say I agree with Mohammed on that one, because I've been saying that too, but it's out for debate. So let us not leave it. Let me let you continue.
Okay, that's a debate for another day.
Yes.
But coming back to why talk about the elections at this particular time, it is important for us to talk about the election because one, election is not an event, it's a process. It is the processes that lead to electing an individual or individuals for us to have a stamp on that process to call it an election. And the process to the election has to be transparent, it has to be open, the public needs to be aware, there needs to be a lot of education done. In this case, we've seen that the Elections Commission has put up some timetable. If you guys go to look at some of them, I had a glimpse at one, that somebody has sent to me. So,
We'll show that.
okay, so some of the timetable, some of the time period they have on that schedule or on the timetable starts from August. It started from August, or it should have started from August. Whether it has started, that's another question. The other issue is we have to take ownership of our elections. We, meaning the government of Liberia, needs to take ownership of the election. If you take ownership of your democratic process, you have a vested interest. And taking ownership include funding the elections commission. The question is the election commission appropriately funded at this time? What is the budget? How much do they have available? Can it meet all of the activities that they have outlined? These are critical questions that we need to begin to look at, because the elections commission could hide behind the issue of not having funding on time, and therefore certain activities were not done or not properly done or hastily done. We cannot continue to have a repetition of what has happened in the past. This has always been the elections commission, tool of excuse, that they did not have their funding on time. Therefore, most of the activities leading to the final day of the elections were either delayed or done hastily and not properly done. As a result, we've always had, all of these fraudulent path to our elections. Voters' registration has been questionable. They've done it without proper assessments. And so you've had instances where one person would be registered at 4 or 5 different locations. We had that in the previous 2 elections, where you have one individual name found at different precincts in different counties. Is because those processes were rushed. One, the elections commission complained that they didn't have the money on time, so they didn't have much uh, they didn't have the funding on time. They didn't have the resources to train those that needed to be trained, and the training was short. And so
Right.
those who went to conduct these activities were ill trained. How long can we have these excuses? That's why it is important for us to begin to discuss these issues.
Yeah.
Look at the processes and the funding.
Thank you. And that's why we are here tonight. We're going to go to the timetable, and I'll put some, based on the NEC website. Here is what we have: August 22nd to September 30th, civil society organization and community-based organization accreditation for the voter registration process begins and ends. October 31st to October 15th, publication of voter registration regulations. September 8th to December 22nd, validation of admin units and amalgamated areas listing boundaries. October 5th to December 2nd, you have the accreditation of party agents, media, and
Yeah,
observers to the
thank you
voter
so much.
registration.
I'll call you.
We also have October 7th will be the official launch of civic voter registration for voter education for voter registration. Mr. Kune, you were expressing voter education. Here you have it. October 23rd to January 19, 2023 is the period for the publication of voter registration centers. December 15, 2022 to March 17, voter registration period. And of course, December 15 to March 24, objection and appeal on voter registration held and determined. And the big day is October 10th, 2023. If you look at the the voter registration has been divided into three. So here they are. So the whole registration process is from December 15 to March 17. And it's being divided in the country is divided into three. Monserrado, Bome, Bapolo, and Cape Mount will be from December 15 to January 6. Then you have Bong, Bassa, Lofa, and Margibi from January 21 to February 10 for the registration. Then Grand Jide, Grand Cru, Maryland, Nimba, River Cess, River G, and Sino, February 25 to March 17. I also want to let you know that in the recast budget or the second budget, 61 million has been budgeted and 20 million has been received. That's the remaining amount is 41 million. I think I thought to mention that as we look at the timetable. And also the customized software for registration. Those are the pending items. And that includes setting up the server, staff training on the biometric equipment and so on and so forth. It's supposed to start on December 15, 2022. It's just important that I mention that as we go through the, so that's the timetable for you. That's the timetable. Uh, Tell me, and we're going to go through that whatever way you want it. Mr. Sharif,
Yes.
just looking at the timetable without picking anything specific, what's your impression?
I'm okay with the timetable. And you know me, I am for the frequency of these elections. I think that, I feel like George Weah was elected 10,000 years ago. It's been a long time. And so this can't come soon enough for me to see what's going to happen, to see what, the opposition has up in their sleeves, and see if there will be some change at, different levels, especially at the legislative level and perhaps at the presidential level. And so, one of the things that I will like to see more of is voter education. And I agree with Woman Coney on that. There has to be enough voter education. The Liberian voter, we talked about this on one of our shows. It has been a long time now since, voters, the way voters vote now is confounding to us because you look at candidate, for example, let me take George Weah for an example. He did not communicate anything to the Liberian people when he got overwhelmed, when he got elected, right? So he has been around, he has been a political force for at least 15 years now. But this is someone who does not communicate much to the Liberian people. And yet, they have him at the top echelon. When it's all said and done with this gentleman, with George Weah, President George Weah, he will be one of the most successful in terms of election. I'm not talking about achievement. In terms of election, he may be one of the most successful politicians in our history. So why is that? The Liberian voters, I don't want to insult the intelligence of the Liberian voters. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I don't think there is enough education. And now, the Election Commission can't do all of that now. This stuff can't be done overnight. This is something that has to be part of our curriculum, I think, so that the people know their rights. So that, when kids go into school, they are taught civics. They are taught their rights. They are what politicians do for them. Then is where I live. I get brochures all the time from my state senator, from my state representative. They're offering services. They're calling on me to go to meetings and stuff like that. So people are responsive around here. Ours are not. So in the elections law, in our constitution, they have to be. Why aren't they? Why aren't we taking them to task? Again, I go back to the elections law that we have. We have a very good, we have a good, if not very good, election law that is not being enforced. If it was enforced, all contenders will be on a level playing field. But what we have now is not a level playing field. You have candidates, good candidates. Maybe someone like Tiawan Gonglo who does not have enough funding to message his campaign throughout the length and breadth of the country and do the different things that he would like to do. Whereas a candidate, incumbent who has no message, has money in George Weah. He has no message. He has nothing going on. So, but he has the money. he's sitting on a pile of cash that he can dispense at any time of the day. Even at night, he can choose to dispense these
Thank you.
resources whatever way he wants to. Thirdly, Dennis, I think the court system, we cannot overlook that. The court has to be an impartial referee in this process, because you best believe there are cases that are going to come to the court, that are going to come before these Supreme Court judges. So the court has to be this impartial referee to uphold our democracy, to uphold the stability of Liberian democracy, to uphold the peace that the country now enjoy. So those are some of the important things. And if the media can talk about this, if the media can host symposium, there were times that symposiums were held in Monrovia and other parts of the country. We don't see that anymore. We need more of that.
Thank you. And Mr. Sharif, the election laws that you're referencing has just been amended. I hope you've been able to see what is in there. But
Yeah.
let me come to you, Mr. Cooney. Let's look at from now to the end of the year what we have as the timetable, and tell me how realistic, if this is something that is doable or it's something that is on course. We see that from August 22nd to September 30th, this is where we're in now, or the accreditation of uh, the CSO and CBO to the voter registration process. It's supposed to end the end of this month. Where are we? I know we don't have, but let's just then August 31st to October 15th, we should be able to public voter registration regulations. September 8th to December 22nd, that will be validated, and those areas and boundaries you're talking about the precincts. October 5 to December 2nd, accreditation of party agents, media observers to the voter registration. And we are hoping that Focus on Liberia will be given the opportunity to observe these things. Civic education, voter education for voter registration, October 7th, that's supposed to end. And then we have, so October 23rd to next year now, we have the period for the publication of the voter registration centers. Looking at those things, how realistic is this something that we can accomplish within the time specified, Mr. Cooney?
Yeah, then it's all those things. Those are all reasonable time to have those things accomplished. But what you need an engaged population. You need engaged civil society organizations. You need engaged political party organizations. You need an engaged citizenry, so that those things don't just be a listing of activities, but they will really be activities that are taking place. And if they're not taking place, then the necessary alarm bell need to sound so that we can know that it is not taking place. What I would hate to see is for people to fold their hands, knowing that these things are not taking place, and march to elections. And after elections, then you citing them. Oh, they're supposed to take place in November. That is not a way to treat ourselves. I mean, it's out there. Civil society organizations need to be accredited this time. If it is not done, raise the alarm. Why is it not being done? You can't just sit back, and let all of these things happen. You don't say anything about it. And then when election results come, you take them as a basis to protest. Elections are not won on election day. Elections are won through adherence to all of the processes that lead to the election. So if the processes are not taking place, we need to be informed. Political parties need to be up in arms. Civil society organizations need to be up in arms. FOL, they say, you should be accredited. If you send your application and you're not accredited, we need to know that, so that the necessary pressure can build in order for this next system to function. This is a democracy. People need to people need to raise their concerns to institutions and entities that make decisions for them. We can't expect to be quiet when these things are not done and then complain later on. And now, with regard to voter education, like I spoke about, it is basically, for me, in my opinion, is the information from the election commission to the voters as to what they need to do. The voting precinct, the voting registration process, the understanding all of this. When I say voter education, I'm not talking about somebody educating the population on the quality of candidates. That is the role for political parties. It It is their responsibility to sell their candidates, to make the distinctions, to make the differences. It is not the responsibility of the election commission to tell the voting population why candidate A should be this or candidate B should be that. The education from the election commission is for electoral processes. How do I register? Where do I go register? Where is the registration precinct? Where is the voting precinct? These are the kind of education we're talking about.
Thank you. Madam Gonglo, where you've participated in few elections, I'm coming to you right now to share your experience and look at this timetable and see, based on your experience, is it realistic? Is it achievable?
You know what? I would say up front that the timetable is unrealistic, and here are the reasons. First, we talk about funding, and when you show the
The budget. Yeah.
what the timetable, when you show this on the screen, here you have a budget. You have the budgeted amount for the election as 61 million, and they say money on hand right now. What has been received is $20 million. Are these activities costed? Is the Elections Commission telling us this is what they need to complete all of these activities that they've listed, at least up to this point, or up to December, or up to what level will they be able to utilize the 20 million? I want to go back to what Kuni said and just piggyback on that. You're correct. I 100% agree with you. This is the time for all of the participants, especially political parties and civil society actors, to begin to x-ray the process from the very get-go. The minute this publication of activities came up, I see here they have one that started August 15th, or should have begun, no, August 31st to October 15th. The question is, has it started? There was another activity for presidential, for CBO's accreditation and voters roll process that's supposed to begin and end on September 30th. Has it started? Who's monitoring that? So these are questions that need to be asked by the political institutions, by political parties, and civil society actors. It is not, the government wants to, of course, keep you blind because it's in their interest for you not to challenge whatever happens, because at the end of the day, they stand to benefit from your lack of information or your lack of being proactive. So I agree with Kuni on this. All the different political parties that want to really win this election need to be on their feet and making sure that these processes, as they've listed, are timely. I don't think it's timely. The time allotted are too short. You have to first consider in the context of Liberia. This is rainy season. It rains cats and dogs in Liberia. Certain time it will rain for 4, 5, 6, 7 days non-stop from morning to night. So when you have these activities listed for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, how realistic is that? Sometimes the few agents that go in the field to do these different activities may just have 2 actual days to work because of the rain. The roads are terrible. Right now, many parts of Liberia are cut off. Unless you say that these activities are restricted to Monrovia. If they are restricted to Monrovia, then maybe yes, but it shouldn't be. Every part of the country must have these processes conducted. You have civil society actors or civil society organizations that operate in the counties. How are they going to be accredited? Are they expected to come to Monrovia? Are they expected to go to the county capital to register? With whom do they register? Are the roads conducive? So I think the timetable in my mind is very limited. It's short. It doesn't give enough, opportunity, enough time for the participants in this election and the civil society organizations and actors to, be able to fully participate. And this is the time for them to raise that red flag.
Mr. Salif, let's look at the timetable from now to December.
Well, I agree with Edith. So I was in Liberia, during the last electoral circle. I had an opportunity to participate in an observation mission of the voter roll verification process. Now, this is a logistical nightmare where the National Elections Commission is supposed to have replicate the election, essentially, election day, where you have various sort of precinct, equivalent of precincts, where NEC officials will be stationed, and individuals, voters will come and they will go, through the list and verify if somebody's name was there, somebody's name wasn't there, whether they register the person or not, what kind of documentation is required. You're talking NEC working with, you know, part of the problem I have with the whole timetable too is the transparency that I think Edith alluded in terms of the budget you want, right? Look, do you have the budget somewhere on your website for the public to see? Because this is public money. In other countries, we see the literate, they will say, look, CBO, voter roll registration, voter roll verification budget, here is it. You have itemization. So we know where this 21 million, the 61 million dollars is really going. Because part of the hesitation is, and the fact they have in the government is, people know that, where the money goes and that's what's happening. And so they may not want to release the funds because they know what has happened to previous funds or what may happen to funds. So if you don't really have things as transparent and open, an open process where we all know where the money will go and what the money will be expended on, you have problem with getting money from donors. You have problems with getting money from the government, except to fund the government's responsibility of the election. That's one. Just the voter roll verification process, as I was saying, just as an example, right? NEC contracted a logistic company that basically has vehicles and rents vehicles, where they have to hire hundreds and thousands of drivers and agents that are going around the country. I went. I was fortunate to travel with some officials of this organization that I was with, and we reached a place where vehicle couldn't go to where we really wanted to go in Nimba County. And so we had to cross a river to get to this town where no vehicle ever reached to see what are the voter verification process, or the people had access to that. Or where was the nearest one where the people went? Yeah, we were in Ganta. We saw several locations. We went up to Yekipa. We saw several locations. We went to Tapeta. We went to different places. We came to Bon County. The closer you come to the city, to town, you see more activities. But then as you go further and further inland, it becomes more and more challenging. So to a point about the rainy season and just clumping these things together, I think is not realistic. And then if you do that, then you're setting yourself up for conflict. You're setting yourself up for failure. Now, it's not my role to tell them what to do and do the job. The professionals, the experts in that field. But as a reasonable, intelligent person, you can look at this and look at what's happening in Liberia in terms of the rainy season and the budget constraint they're talking about and say, I don't think this particular one is realistic. Another quick example is look at the campaign period that if you can put it up there, I think it's just 1 month. That's when campaign happens.
Right. And why does that happen that way?
It's baffling to me.
Is it unique to Liberia, or do you have any example
It's
where?
not unique to Liberia. Campaigns are typically open. You have people 2 to 3 months period. Some places campaign for nearly a whole year. I mean, we see here in the U.S. There's not regulation that no, you cannot talk about your candidacy. You cannot discuss the issues. But in Liberia, they have regulation that you cannot actively campaign, be telling people to vote for you and so forth and so on. The NEC has to declare that campaigning is now open. Campaigning is now open before Dennis Jack can go and say, oh, vote for me. I'm a candidate. I'm better than this person. And actively go around, print t-shirt, gather, give stump speeches and have campaign rallies, right? So that 1 month campaigning is just not realistic for a general presidential legislative national election. I mean, you ought to be kidding me to want to think that this is a realistic timetable given the time of the year that we're talking about here. And there are other issues that hopefully we can talk about later on. I read about, I think they've gone biometrics with registration and verification, right? That was, yeah, this is one of the issues Kenya had that led to this Odinga going to court, right? So they deploy the technology cover, basically the biometrics cover voter registration, voter roll verification, and transmission of results. Now, those are very, very critical. So one candidate, Odinga, in Kenya, insisted that, look, you have to have a backup, have some paper ballots, because our people are not all educated. You have, good, substantially educated population, but let's face it, in our case in Liberia, most of our people, somebody has to tell them, thumbprint here, do this here, right? So you say, oh, well, you have biometric registration. I don't know if Liberia has gone biometrics on voter registration, verification, and transmission of result. But transmission of result is so critical because it goes from the precinct level to the district level, and it should go to national. And so Kenya, because Odinga had gone to court on each occasion, and then they improved, they went back each time, the points of challenge were then improved upon, that led them to this efficient process. We saw this cycle. In Liberia, our system has not been improving that way, and there are a lot of areas, drivers of conflict, potential areas for disputing and casting doubt on the election results. Ultimately,
thank you. And talking about the biometric, what I saw there is the election commission was in the legislature before the Senate to talk about this, because the item before the start of registration before December 15, right? So you need to have the customized software for registration, and this biometric system, they have setting up the servers, the staff training on the biometric equipment. So that's supposed to complete before December 6, December 15. And also I want us to look at, we're talking about the elections. So if you look at the count, the way they broke this down is December 15 to January 6. Monserrato, Bombing, Bapolo, and Cape Town should be complete. Then Bong, Bassa, Lofa, and Mogibi should be completed by February 10th. Then going to Grand Cru, Sino, River G, Maryland, River says, and then you put, the count is so populated at Nimba, and that's supposed to end March 17th. Looking at that, also, you want to take into consideration the money that is needed to do this. Either raise that question. Mr. Sharif, let's look at those counties. You are all the way from Kanweken. Do you really think this is going to happen? Looking at the rules and and when the election commission, the NEC appeared before the Senate, that's one thing they said. They said, well, on that side, sometimes there's no network. So this is not going to work. And next say, well, we're going to have paper, a manual process attached to it, so that if you can do this, then you go manual. The Senate representative, it was before the Representative Swakoko, then they raised the issue of, hey, look at the distance. And really in these areas, they're so far. So what's going to happen if there's no internet? And somebody say, oh, no, don't, if you want to give an example of rural area, don't call Grand Cru. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, so, I hear all the objections about the timetable. Reason why I would say, move ahead with this is because what is the alternative? Is the alternative now to push these things back so we're pushing 2023 back? I don't think I don't think that's a logical alternative. We've taken so long, right? So 6 years, So I don't see, and I listen to Edith and Ahmed, but what is my question to my colleague is what is the alternative? I didn't hear any alternative. So for me, I like to go with this now in places like Calipo, right? So, you're talking about a very rural town and behind all the way behind Calipo. So you have where you have to cross creeks, right? You actually get, back in the day, right? So you have to get in. You have to get in the creek. You have to cross this, massive waterway, right, to get to the nearby town, which is maybe 5 miles away, not too far. But that's how bad things are in some of these rural areas. And when you go to your county, Dennis, there is a place there, around Pine Town. Blue Body is all the way behind Pine Town. The road there was terrible, and these roads were maintained by logging companies. So I do understand all of the logistics associated with this. But you know what? The problem is there is no commitment from the government. So, for example, the money is there, right? The money is there to fund election. And election has to be funded because, again, as Ahmed mentioned, and I think most of the panelists mentioned, election is the lifeblood of our democracy. So, what better way to invest, the nation's resources? You have to invest it in election. But you know what it is that the incumbents really are very reluctant when it comes to these things because if the incumbent knows that he's really in trouble, what is the incentive for him to make the extra effort? And that is the reason why these election laws have to be enforced. And I mentioned the court system because what's going to happen? What's going to happen is there will be challenges, and these challenges, the adjudication of these challenges will come to the court. And so if you don't have the independent judiciary, then we are in trouble. One of the things that I would like to see, Dennis, and I think you asked the question at the top of the show, is that even though it's not mandated by law, but I would like to see at least two presidential debates, one vice presidential debate. I would love to see debate. I would love to see a debate where, a diaspora news organization, it doesn't have to be us, but, a diaspora news organization will participate. I would love it to be us, but, the idea is that, if we see these presidential candidates, maybe go to maybe Sonny Cole, maybe Harper, maybe go there and have a debate, where this is televised and broadcast all across the country, all over the world. I think that will mark a beginning because I've never seen that happen. They had something before where George Weah, said he wasn't going to attend. He felt, he didn't participate. That was, I think, in the 2020 before the 2017 election, he did not participate. So we want to make sure that not only that these guys what they have, their platform that they have that they're hiding behind, not only that we're able to read their platform, but we want them to come to the voters. We want them to come to us to communicate their vision to the Liberian people, and I think that's extremely important. In this cycle, if this is something that that can be put through, although it's not, they're not legally required to do so. So again, going back to the timetable, I have concerns. My concern is, what else? If this is not feasible now, then what is the alternative? Are they going to push back the process? I don't think the process should be pushed back. That is really my major concern.
Yeah. And Mr. Kuni, you raised the issue of people actually making this to happen. I mean, you can just sit there and argue about, like what we saw before, framework document, or argue about who is which candidate, is taller than the other one. When the election that is going to determine your fate, you are not doing anything about it. You are not saying anything about it. If we have this, for instance, August 31st, even before that, September 30th. This process supposed to begin last month. Is it happening? How do we know whose role it is to make sure that this is happening? And if it is not happening, whose Who's going to tell us? Is it the media? Is it political parties going to put pressure? Or you just sit and say, well, I'm waiting October 10 and I'm going to go vote and I'm going to win. And at that point, if you don't win, you say, well, they cheat me. So, I mean, what else can we do to get people talking about this, to get people raising the necessary flags so that these things are put out there? And by the way, the Election Commission website where I got this information from, you can go there. It's you can go to the website. It's right there, and on the right hand side you see election timetable. So that will be the information. It's right here. NEC.
Do they have the budget there, Dennis?
I didn't see the budget, but in there when the NEC commissioner made her a press conference, she talked about the budget, because first they were requesting for more, but when they did a recast, it came down to 61 million. Even that they don't have it. So with all these items in the timetable, these various tasks, do they have the money for it? And how can we make sure that there is money for it, that these things really are happening, things that are supposed to happen are happening within time and within budget? Mr. Kunin, how can we get to know this in your view?
Well, it's doing exactly what we're doing here. But, a certain topic here are really, really about the national interest. So when it comes to that discussion, I hesitate to be partisan on these issues. The conduct of free and fair election in Liberia goes to the benefit of all of us, no matter who we support. But like you said, and Edith and myself indicated, there are already dates that have passed. Which political group have we heard from to say, what, this is what the commission says is not happening? Nobody. You found one of the opposition leaders, basically writing letters to Georgia as if to say that boyfriend and girlfriend writing one another. They're doing these useless things. But important issue like election dates that have already been set. Some of these days may expire and the Liberian people would know nothing about it. And that is the sad thing. You see, it kind of reminds me of the atmosphere of the 90s. When the country was going towards the 1997 elections, where politicians in Monrovia refused to work, they refused to come together, they refused to put their resources together because they felt that just the mere measure of Taylor was sufficient to defeat Taylor. And those of us that were in national security who were seeing things differently. And so the only vision they had was, oh man, who will go and run again? And not Taylor. And the man that did, the man that murdered. And the Liberian people gave Taylor 75%. Unfortunately, you got opposition figures who feel, wrongly, in my view, that George Weah is so bad, so the only thing they're waiting for is election. They don't need to invest in the process. They don't need to pay attention to the process because they think that, that's their path. You just need this George Weah who has so destroyed the country. So for me, as a sedition, I encourage them on that kind of wrongful thought. But elections are important because even though as I have a candidate, I want a credible process. And I don't want people coming here and making empty noise when you refuse to talk at the time you're supposed to talk. So we have important days that may expire or that may soon expire. What party here talking about that? Every day sanction. The new vision for our country now for the opposition is sanction. For them, sanction solve all the problems. That's their new vision. That is the sad thing about our country. So this is the point. For me, my only, like I told you earlier, my only problem with this whole thing is this biometric thing. I understand it captures some physical features of the voter, most likely the fingerprint and other things like that. Maybe it may be a good thing, but the fact that we haven't used it before, I don't know what combination is going to be used. I don't know whether it will only be used for voter registration or, as Agnes said, it will be used to transmit election results. I don't know what combination. These are serious questions lawmakers need to ask. And who sat in the legislature? I know you're here to hear it. The opposition control the legislature. Who said that? They control the legislature.
Right.
They need to ask you, what kind of biometric system are you introducing? I would have loved to see biometric introduced maybe in by-elections and other things before you raise it to, this crucial presidential election. But we don't know what combination is being introduced. Is it just the car? And then everybody talking about the infrastructure for it. Electricity. What system does it work with? We don't know. What are the questions we're supposed to be asking? So for me, this is really important because I think Liberia should be able to move forward after 2023, irrespective of who wins. Even though I want my candidate to win, but we should be able to move forward as a country. But people are not asking these questions. We so absorbed in the sanction thing, as if to say sanction is the salvation for the country.
Put fire under your feet.
No cross talking, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kuni, I like what you said, right? Those in IT, they call that piloting. You have to pilot the project first. Do a pilot project to make sure that the biometric works. You can even, like you said, in a by-election, like the one we had in Lofa, just one county, right? And, one seat. Pilot that and see how it works. But just like we do here, before you come, if you are new to join the broadcast here, we do a test run to make sure you can come on, your lighting, everything's good, and then you come on. But with this 2023, and you have maybe a month or so to do this, but Madam Gonglo, where you think the timetable is unrealistic. Mr. Sherry said, but what's the alternative? What do we do?
So, yes, there are alternatives. There are different activities that have been captured. Some of them, of course, all of the activities are important, but some may be more important than others. So you go back and rework the timetable. For instance, where you have the CSO and CBO's accreditation. It says from August 31st to October 15th. For me, that time is too short, right? It's too short. But then you have here for I'm trying to look where here.
Yeah, it's on the screen. The CSO is on the screen.
Okay, the CSO is on the screen. But you have the I think it's the publication of voter registration regulations. Mm-hmm. The time for that is far longer than some of the most essential aspects of the election. They have from September 8th to December 22nd, just for publication of voter registration regulations. It's just a regulation, and they gave it 3 months, 3 months, September to December. You can take away some of that and bring it to the amalgamation of areas and listing of boundaries, because that's important. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The electorate and the candidates must know and be aware of the areas they're going to be voting. If I'm running as a representative a candidate, for instance, I need to know what areas fall under my constituency and then the various precincts far ahead of time. And you must have sufficient time for all of the reasons that we mentioned, the terrible terrains, the road conditions, the logistical problems, like Ahmed mentioned earlier. We had a nightmare in 2020. Even on election day, election workers could not get to their places of assignment with ballot boxes because either the card that they had broke down or the card that should have come didn't come. And you heard the situation where we had people voting in empty cartoons because they stole ballot boxes overnight. The car brought it midnight and there was no security to mind them. So the election itself, the process is not protected. The only thing we can do to ensure that there's protection, there's sufficient transparency in this process is to make sure there's sufficient time allotted to each of the activity, and then the budget is available to ensure that those activities are carried out. The time to do that is now. We cannot wait until it occurs. We need to start like yesterday to fast track all of these and check on them and check on the Elections Commission. Like Kuni said, the election is about the country. It's about our democracy. This is not about your political party or your candidate winning. But what if your candidate wins in a fraudulent election and does not have the mandate of the people? How can you govern? How can we be respected? How can the country move forward? So this is about the lifeblood of Liberia. So everyone who is at different levels, whether you're in civil society group, or you are in political party, or you are just a concerned citizen, or you are in the government, we need to follow this process and make sure the right things are done, because it speaks to the future of our country and the future of our children, and the future of the democracy, the safety of the nation. That's what we're talking about here. Election is a critical aspect of democracy, and we cannot overlook it. And I think the Elections Commission and the government in power is overlooking that. To talk about cutting down budget to 61 million, and then even with the $61 million, giving less than 50% of that. It shows lack of political will. It shows lack of commitment. And it needs to be called out. We are calling it out. And I will end by saying, Dennis, what we started here should continue. I think that every week we should talk about the election. We should talk about the processes. We should flag what is not happening and what needs to happen. And I hope that other talk show platforms will take on this and not just talk, but we need to talk the critical issues that are right, beneath our noses, and it's happening. As long as we don't talk about it, the Elections Commission is going to get away with it, because they've gotten away with it in the past. So it's become business as usual. And then in the end, they come with the usual excuse, but we didn't have the funding on time. So it's time for us to talk right now.
Thank you. Mr. Salif, let me put the timetable for registration again. And I'm December 15 to March 17.
Right.
From January 15, February 15, March 15, that's 3 months. To cover the entire country, including my own Sino County, you're going to do that in 3 months. It looks unrealistic, but why do you think it's this way? Is it, and let me put some options out there. Is it because there's no money? Is it because we're waiting for the good old international community to provide the money? Is it because people intend to create some chaos so that they can cheat? Or is it because, as Mr. Sherry will say, incompetence? Why would people do things like that? When I was a refugee in Guinea, this guy, when he wants to steal, he will bring the supply to our refugee camp very late, and he will sit there. He would start sharing the food very slowly. So as the people get so exhausted, and it's in the evening, people will just rush on and fight, and then he writes a report. They fought over the food, but before he could get to our camp, he sold one truck already. So people like to create some conditions, some chaos, so that when there is fraud, then we don't notice it. What is the intention here?
Well, no, to the defense of the Election Commission, we see this in sub-Saharan African electoral planning. It's staggering. So they staggered around the country for logistical reasons. They're not able to deploy just once on 1 day or 2 days across the country. Just the very reasons we're speaking about: difficult terrain, transportation, because even just for practical purposes, you don't have 3,000 or 20,000 vehicles spreading out, drivers deploy 1 day, everybody going through the length and breadth of the country. So what they do is they stagger it all over the country, so that, and say, all right, we're focusing on this region for this week or for the next 2 weeks. So you have the resources is focused here, right? Because the electoral officials are also very critical. You need oversight. You need a critical people in Cape Town, Bapolo, and Bomi during this period. There's a surge of people, there's a surge of resources and logistical equipment and so on this side of the country. And then you look at, depending on the geography, which county is bigger and the population and so on. They've done the 2017 cycle, they did that. So I don't have a particular problem with why they're staggering, right? And Mr. Sharif, to just add to what Edith was saying, we're not saying don't hold election in 2023. We all want the election. We're just talking about planning. We're talking about planning and awareness around the activities. Okay, so
right, and Mr. Shelley, that's my question. Why is this planning so poor? It's not just the staggering; it's other things that are being in that timeline. They're not realistic.
oh yeah. No, the argument I've heard the NEC folks make is, well, the budget was slow. We asked for the money ever since how many months ago, how many like last year, and then the money is triggering in, and without money we can't do any of that. There's some things that are not so money intensive to do.
Right.
Publication of the regulation, creating awareness and things like that. There are a lot of activities that NET could have been building up. But it's a the cat and mouse game that they play with Ministry of Finance and NEC. So when you begin to do the activity, well, they're already doing it in the pussy, they want money, they're already doing it. So we want the money. So they're all it's a negotiation technique where they delay and then because they know that the government has to oversee the conduct of the election. The government will provide the money will come. This is what the budget hasn't been funded. If the budget is not funded, these are very, sort of financial, heavy, logistical undertaking. So that's the argument they're making. But your point I taking, where even within that, we need to see the competence. We need to see the wisdom. We need to see the efficiency. We need to see the goodwill, how you're planning, how it's happening. If the budget is not forthcoming at all, we can tell, man, you see good, competent, efficient process. Anybody, any educated person, even not educated, common sense will make you understand that this is happening. Publish your budget, line items. We need this. We can even take that and shame the government. Can you see they need this, right? Who are all your vendors? Who are you going to subcontract with? But sometimes these are friends and friends of friends. That's how they make their money.
Right.
They give the logistical transportation.
And we're doing some work for them right now.
So,
why can't they outsource some of this training to people like that? Here's my question to all of you, right?
So Dennis, real quick, right?
Yeah, before you come in, I want you to add to that is, why are we doing this? Maybe I've been out of Labrador for so long. Why are we doing this registration all the time? Every time it's new registration. I mean, here in the United States, I don't want to do that comparison because the logistical reach. I don't see people going around registering all the time, right? But every time we're registering, what's the difference here?
Yeah, so Dennis and Ahmed, I appreciate you, just following all on that incompetence, because I don't think a show passes by that I don't say this word. I don't like to say it, but circumstances oblige me to do so. So when you see what is going on, so it's not now that the Elections Commission has started doing this. So why hasn't the opposition raised issues to force the Elections Commission to do those things that should have been done like last year? Why hasn't the opposition forced the leadership, George Weah, the administration, to make sure that those things were done? That is what we're doing now. Which one of the opposition political leaders or parties are doing what we're doing right now? And so they're behind. They're always falling behind the air game. And when you do that with an entrenched autocracy, with individuals who are not going to readily relinquish power, you're really putting yourself behind in this game, because you have to beat them at their game. You have to make sure that you're forcing them to make sure that, for example, whatever they're doing now, that should have been started last year, right? last year. If George Weah, if the administration is reluctant in releasing funding to the Election Commission, that's a no, because again, as everyone has stated, this is an essential part of our democracy, very essential. So we're doing things like we were doing in 1867, where so back then, where people would take the ballots, right, would walk in these bush paths with ballots and come to Monrovia with these ballots. So nothing has substantially changed, even in this age of technology, in the age of everything, right? Edith mentioned bad roads. Bad roads have been around forever. And so when we talk about bad roads and, CDC supporters, question these issues. Oh, when was the last time you were there? George Weah is doing this. He's fixing the roads. He's doing this and that and the other. Like our brother Koenig, who told us today that, the road was going to Calipo, but, this should have been done like 6 years ago. Okay, it should have been done like 10 years ago. Not just him, and I'm not just blaming him. It should have been done like 20 years ago, or maybe 50 years ago, right? It has not been done. So my thing right now is, as much as we're going to be critical of the leadership, and we've done enough of that, but what pressure has the opposition put on this administration that's reluctant to make sure that the Elections Commission does the right thing, as 2023 is right around the corner? Not much has happened, right? So I guess, again, everyone is waiting for the mighty United States of America to say something, and they're going to jump behind that. I'm tired of that. We need to do something. We need to have a solution for ourselves to make sure that the leadership is being held accountable. I don't think George Weah is listening, right? He doesn't. I don't think he. Perhaps he watches these shows, but he doesn't take any of these into consideration. If Boycott and Cummins and Gonglo, if they get together and have a mass protest, George Weah is going to listen. George Weah is going to pay attention, but that's not happening. And that needs to happen like right now.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig. And elections, we know 6 years in advance that we're going to have elections. Other things that we've not mentioned include the census, right? How we should have the census to know how many people in the country. In fact, the census every 10 years. I learned that in grade school, and so these are things that's supposed to happen because of money. They have not happened. We're going into election anyway. Voters education and sensitizing the voters. These things, with or without timetable, these are something that you can do in one way or the other. And then, in fact, when you ask political parties for their platform, they say, oh, no, we can't tell you our platform now because the other party is going to steal it. Right. So we're going to wait until the time campaign is open, and then we can tell you about our platform. A lot of things can be done way before elections, including the census, including, talking about elections like we are doing tonight. But these things are not done. And we know that these things are going to happen. It's like we know we're going to die, but we don't worry about life insurance until we are so sick that we can get up again. Somebody even compared this, that if we let the government alone like this, the election commission, behind the scene, they are writing some rules. They are playing with some variables. Okay, so it is like this person, like it says, like someone is calling you to their house to play a football game. They are going to provide a referee. They are going to provide an assistant referee, and it's going to be determined on their court. Yet, you are warming up to go there and play. What do you expect if these people are making all the rules and you were going there on the day of the game to play? As you said, Mr. Cooney, elections are lost or won long before the elections day. What's your comment before we can bring in our callers?
Yeah, Dennis, as we go through elections, one of the before my comment, you asked a very important question, and maybe some of our colleagues here that are familiar with election may educate us. Why do we do this voter registration every time there is election? Why the election commission need to do that? Why is it the responsibility of the voter to update their own registration if they move from county to county, from district to district? Why is it the mechanism put in place by the election commission that, look, if you move, this is the way you can update your registration? Why we keep doing this thing? I asked that question before, and I didn't really get an answer. And the huge cost associated with this voter registration thing and the time that it takes, maybe that's another thing for us to look at. The question that you asked, look, Dennis, you know, like I said, I never contested national elections, but I've contested elections and all the conspiratorial thing about elections. All of those things are part of the process. But again, the way you can cut through that conspiracy, whether somebody is cooking something behind the fence that you don't know about and they're pumping you up to come and play, is to question what has been made public, is to make sure that what has been made public is what is obtaining. You know, all of us have a responsibility to make sure that the process is transparent. So it doesn't matter what somebody is cooking and they're not cooking, but we have an open process here that this is how we're going to conduct this election. These are the things that we need to do. And active citizens need to be part of all of these things to make sure that the election is conducted as it is spelled out. We're talking about money business here, you know, and everybody know about this election 6 years now. And guess what we've been doing in the country, you know? See how our national cake has been divided, you know, by legislators, you know, whether it is the 30,000 that we take annually, whether it is the 45,000 that we give ourselves new car every 3 years. And look at all of these things. I mean, it's easy to blame the president.
Or the new law that say even when we die, continue to pay us.
It is easy to blame the president, but Dennis, to be honest with you, we miss the mark if we attribute all of our problem to the presidency, thinking that if we don't solve the root of our problem, once we change the president, Liberia will change. It has never happened. I've seen 5 presidents change in my lifetime, and the country still remains the same way it is. It's because of this mentality that, oh, let's just get rid of the president, everything will change. I mean, 6 years, people are buying cars. People are giving themselves constituency fees, all of these things, and our election remain unfunded, or maybe for a better word, inadequately funded. Right. And now we're talking about money.
And Mr. Cooney, sometimes it looks like we don't even know the connection, how these things are connected. That
and then you talk about the census. How many times have they not postponed the census? You know, the legislature keeps setting different dates. It will be this date. It will be that date. The key we're looking for is some kind of international financier to come and finance these things. Let me eat my own money and let Dennis Yahoo is outside my house be the one to bring food, you know, to my house to clean my clothes. That is the mentality. And so I don't know.
I'm glad Cooney is saying that.
Yeah. Let me let me throw in our one caller here, then you can continue. They are paying fees when they stay long on the line. Caller, your name and where you calling from.
My name is Golian Eskimo. I'm calling from Maryland.
Go ahead, Mr. Kemo.
Okay, Dennis, thank you so much, and thank the panelists over there. If I have never agreed with the CDC party before, today, he's my man, and he's speaking the truth, even though he's speaking the truth, and he says, I like it like that, let the opposition sit down and think. These things are done intentionally by the government who providing the money to be in the favor. They hold the money. The money is there, but they hold it and give you little to strangle the process so that it can be in their favor. And then people asking a question. All of these questions, some of you asking, they were asked in the legislature yesterday on the floor there. Ms. Fakoko then asked the same question. Why is it that the program, the registration program is starting with the presidential election? Why they didn't follow it at the local county election to see how well they're going to work? They just bring it in now. The question was asked also for network.
Yeah.
But then that lady, the election lady could not answer any other question, and they put on a technical person. Okay, if you know you come to the legislature for answering question or explanation, you bring your technical people to answer all the technical questions. But the boomerang could not answer any of the technical questions. The lawmaker raised the questions, no good answer or give up. Like you say, these things are done intentionally. The government, they got the money, but they're not going to give it piece by piece to struggle the process. And then before that, somebody said that there's no opposition. Oh no, there's no opposition. They just said over there, like CDC Pape said, they're waiting for his kind of boot point. Before they see where people want to be, and then Papa Mami then sat on there, they say, Taylor, the barman, they'll just go to the barber and say, oh, Taylor, the barman, nobody will go for Taylor. And the husband Taylor whipped them. It will be the same repetition coming right here. They will say that, so we are going corrupt, so we are corrupt, the people suffering, and the same people voting back, then it will come up. And the people will tell you that yes, there was irregularity, but it's not enough to cancel the election result. The thing they happen in Kenya. So here in Liberia, there is no data system. I work for most of the time I take part in the election here.
Oh, so you do a citizen.
When it's time for us to go west, we don't take 1 cent until the whole process after the election, the result, everything, and now 1 or 2 weeks before our check come in the mail. But Liberia, they say, you don't give me money without going to the pool or without going to the play. I was in Liberia the Taylor election.
Thank you.
We were taking the ballot to Tony and Peter. We were supposed to go that night. Our boys said he get paid. We took everything and put it in the car, and we slept full money to carry stuff because they were waiting for money. So here it remind you, they send you note. Any election coming, they send you letter in the mail. Hey, John Brown, you registered to this precinct last election or so time. That's why you're going to go vote. They will remind you. And then they tell you early voting is so time, and then election day is so time. All these things happen because it dies in a database. But Liberia, I want to register every week or every month to register because exactly you register. That people, you're not going to see it anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Kemo.
So that's the problem. And then my question to Mrs. Ware is this. Mrs. Ware, you are aware of all of these things. You went through election before. You are one of my favorite persons in Liberia I like. Election from that thing. But what are you doing? Now your brother is running. And I know you on his team. What is your advice to him? Everything that you are saying here, you haven't heard him. Everything is coming. Everything is coming. Everybody look at coming. You don't back out and sit down there. Everybody else sit down. Nobody talk. Mr. Carter, we don't hear Bongo talking, but we don't hear Waka. Everybody.
Interviewing Carter next week Wednesday, so you will hear him.
What are we saying? What are you saying to your brother? We have not heard him saying anything on this topic now. So can you please?
Thank you, Mr. Kemo.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
And we pray that this continue always. Every week, I leave bring it in one so we can stop.
Thank you. Madam Gonglo,
so that was a question to me. Thank you so much, Kemo. I think if you listen to most of Councillor Gonglo's statements over the last couple of weeks, he has always questioned, he has raised questions about the electoral process. He's talking issues such as when there was this talk about writing a new law that will allow the government to dismiss all of the sitting magistrates right now to be able to, hire new ones. I think he's talked extensively on that. But here is Councillor Gonglo's dilemma. He still they've not gone through the convention for him to become a candidate. So the question is, what is his party? I think it should be institutional. What is the party doing? What is the party saying? Is the party following the process? But it cannot be the individual who is just an aspirant. In the case of Cummings and maybe Mr. Bwaka and others, they are already candidates of their institutions. And so they can speak on behalf of their institutions. Hopefully, Councillor Gonglo becomes a candidate in the next 1 week. And then him and the party, or he can speak on behalf of the party and address most of these issues. But let's come back to the issue of what are the political parties doing. Someone mentioned here there needs to be a sort of coalition or collaboration of these different political parties, especially the opposition bloc, on this issue, because what affects one affects all of them. They have to take this one central issue as something that if they cannot unite on anything else politically, they
Mhm.
must unite on the electoral process.
Yeah.
They must unite on making sure they hold this government feet to fire. And I like what the caller said. This government is playing with fire, really. Because not that the government does not have money, they have money to buy cars, they have money to build mansions in Jamaica and other places, they have money to, buy private jet, but they don't have money to fund a simple election, an election that holds the lifeblood of the country's continuation or its final, death, for lack of a better way to express it. So I think it's because of lack of political will, and they're very intentional about that. It's not that the government does not know that this is an important process, but they're intentional. They've done it before and they've gotten away with it. And so they're taking from that playbook. This is not the first time they've done it in representative election, senatorial election. And now I think they've even done it in presidential election. And nothing happened. So it has become business as usual. But this time around, the 2023 election is critical because where the country is right now, as you listen to Liberians, of course, my brother Kuning will say that's perception, but perception is not that far away from reality, especially if you are not providing, counter argument that will make the perception to go away.
Thank you.
People are struggling, and this election is very important to put Liberia on the right track. So we cannot take it like it's time for all of us civil society actors. And I say again, I can't say this loud enough, Mr. Ja, you've taken the lead, and I hope other talk show platforms will follow you so that we continue to talk and talk and talk. If the opposition will not come together, we will do that work because we have a stake in this country. We're all stakeholders and we'll make sure the right things are done.
Thank you. Let's read a few comments here. This one from Hamilton Zilli. The introduction of the biometric system requires more time than we think. Piloting the project and having a mock registration first will be a good start. Uh, Kafumba Soare, we can only become serious about issues only if the United States becomes serious about issues affecting ourselves. Where is our sovereignty? Darling, what would say conducting voter registration every election period has corrupt intent. He continues, it is about time the government allowed the helicopter belonging to the disgraced PFP leader to be brought into the country. We don't Lucini Sako say one of the best show on Facebook, great panelist. Oh,
Thank you, Lucini.
yeah. Those are the comments. We'll take a short break. But let me, before we go to that break, let me tell you what is coming up on Focus on Liberia. Tomorrow is Friday, so on every Friday at 6, we have the literary hour with Professor Dr. K. Moses Namwe and the resident scholar Jackie Sayer. You don't want to miss that. That is every Friday at 6 o'clock, right here on Focus on Liberia. Then Friday night, guess what? We're going to have a debate here, debate night of these three candidates. Mr. Boakai, Mr. Cummings, and Councillor Gonglo, which of them has the best chance to beat President Weah in 2023? We have George Preston Lobo of the Unity Party, Abula Mambe, a Gonglo supporter, and Jonathan Dolaka, an ANC member and Team Cummings supporter, will be here to debate. And we have the independent Robert Glegben Gagwa Jr., who's going to provide independent analysis. You don't want to miss that. Also, on Saturday, we have Hassan Gassem Jallo. He's born in Liberia to Ghanaian parents. He's going to talk about the discrimination faced by members of his community That's the Fulani community, and he's going to use himself as an example. I'll be hosting him right here, 12 noon on Sunday, September 11th. Also, next week, we're going to meet Mr. Joseph Sakor and his team of he's the executive director of the Liberia Medical Mission. Tuesday, September 13th, they will be here to talk about their mission. They'll be launching recruitment drive so they can go on their mission this year. And on Wednesday, Dr. Daniel E. Cassell will be my guest to talk about his vision for Liberia, the PLP, and where has he been lately. We have not heard much. Dr. Cassell will be here on Focus on Liberia Said Wave, the one we all agree is the most well-rounded talk show host on the planet.
Why, Joe? Why, Joe?
Thank you so much. At this time, we're going to take a short break. After the short break, we're going to go into our Tabata session. You don't want to miss that.
Hi, my name is Addie Tyler from Pennsylvania, and you're watching Focus on Liberia.
Welcome back to Tough Talking Thursday. This is Focus on Liberia, and we're discussing the road to 2023. Today, we are focusing on the election timetable. And from what I'm hearing, timetable is not really realistic, but how do we make that work? We are calling on not just the election commission, but also political parties, civil service organization, community-based organization, media institution that we all continue to talk about this, or we begin to talk about it because we have a stake in the game. At this time, we're going to go around the room for our Tabata of the week. Every week, there's some Tabata going on somewhere, I can guarantee that. And so this week, we have Tabata. Let's start with Mr. Admin Salif for his Tabata of the week.
Well, it has to be I think it's the Deputy Minister of Transport, whose vehicle, I don't know if he or her, I don't know the particular individual, but that minister's vehicle landed in the ditch on the RIA highway, where citizens have been complaining for months that the way engineers are working on that road or not working on that road, and they've scattered everything. It's a death trap for international visitors or Liberian citizens, and there you have it. and as God will have it, is the vehicle of the minister responsible for road transport.
Oh, wow.
The vehicle was going to get a minister from the airport, landed in the ditch.
Wow.
So
That is West Tabata.
I don't know what. It could have been any other minister. It looks the reverend. There's a hand of higher power saying, enough is enough, you guys. Work and work for the Liberian people.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Mr. Kuni.
Well, a lot of Tabata always in Liberia. Liberia is never shut of Tabata. At the end of the Liberian Civil War, The TRC Truth and Reconciliation Commission, they did a very exhaustive investigation about the war, identify reasons, identify people connected to it, people who supported it, well documented. And the Tabata that took place last week is Alexander Cummings' later response to Weir. And I say it's a Tabata because this guy is being promoted as a corporate executive. Corporate executives make decisions on sound information, research, well researched. And instead of Cummings basing a letter on anything sound, he took his accusation of Weir from Yeke Koluba, that Weir supported Law and Model. I mean, for Cummings to bring himself to that level, it is embarrassing. I was shocked. As a serious political leader, you don't go around picking up street gossip and you want for people to take you credible. When there is a whole book of the TRC that detail the different connections of individuals connected to the war. And for Mr. Cummings to have been sounding like Yeke Koluba, that's the greatest Tabata that I saw last week. I think Joe, we are really there with him in that letter and he got confused.
Madam Gonglo, what's your Tabata of the week?
You know what? I almost say I had no Tabata until, I'm not sure the transport ministers, road transport ministers, car in a ditch. I think that's the greatest Tabata. And truthfully, I agree. There was some divine hand behind that. Why the transport minister's vehicle when this road has been a death trap and everyone continues to complain about it? And sometimes it baffles me. This is the face of our country. That's the entry. What does it tell any stranger coming to Liberia about the country you're coming to? If the road leading to the airport and from the airport looks like that. So it was good that that car went in the ditch. Hopefully, within the next 1 or 2 weeks, they will complete it.
Mr. Sharif.
Yeah, Ahmed, I don't know how I can follow them. I don't know how I can follow that. But mine is in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So in Kinshasa, right? So I believe it was today or yesterday. A group of officials went to dedicate a bridge, a brand new bridge, right? I think Ahmed, you saw that too. Brand new bridge, and by the time they were ready to cut the ribbon to open this bridge, the bridge collapsed, and they had to be hustled out of that. The guardrails and everything collapsed. Talk about incompetence, inefficient, and corruption. Was there nobody to
Wow.
access this first, to inspect this first for durability and all of that? Like, who built that bridge? That is just the biggest sabotage of the week. Talk about corruption, inefficiency, and incompetence. That's what that is.
I saw that the donor that donated money to fund the bridge was on top of the bridge.
And even the guardrail, you saw the guardrail all went with it.
And they said no one got hurt except for the reputation of the engineering firm that
terrible thing. So it's not just Liberia. Man.
But it's sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
It's people who are black like us.
True.
There's something wrong.
True.
And just because one person is, you don't hear this much enough Africa as much as you hear it.
Trust me, they have something.
It happens, but at the level that is happening, especially in West Africa, it is terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible.
There has to be a breaking point to this terrible and horrible, shaming news that's coming from all over West Africa.
My Tabata is closely linked to Admet's Tabata, was they asked with the picture that we show of the car in the ditch, and not wishing bad thing on anybody. We thank God nobody got hurt.
Right.
But the public work minister blamed that they have not been able to condition the road because they dug up these things on the road. Those were dug up And because of the weather now, they are not able to because there's water running in there. And the public work minister blamed that on climate change. I think that was the
Imagine.
biggest. That was
You serious? Climate He's joking.
No, I mean it's not funny, it's crazy, but
Yeah.
and
fair
here is how one member of the CDC explained the climate change. Say, well, we used to anticipate because we have the rainy season and the dry season. I hate those two names because I think our seasons are more than that.
Right.
So it said the rainy season used to come from this month to this month, right? But due to climate change, so based on that pattern, they will anticipate when to do the construction. But because of climate change, that has been interrupted, is being affected. So let's say if we used to expect rain for 8 months, now we are having rain for 10 months. As a result, we are not able to do it. So that's how the pin it on climate
Oh my
change.
God.
So Mr. Salif, what you saw here, I think you saw the picture very well. I'm going to show that again.
Yeah.
According to the public minister, this is due to climate change.
Climate change. Imagine.
Let's go around the room. Thank you so much. This is just the beginning of our discussion on the elections, and we want other media institutions to follow suit. And if there is possible for NEC to even talk to other institutions, let's share the work. Let all of us play a part, because if the elections are not done right, we all suffer, right? We have a history of bad election resulting to something that we all don't like. So thank you. At this time, we'll go around the room and get your closing comment for the night. And this time, let me start with Mr. Sharif.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. So thanks to my fellow co-panelists. Dennis, so the Liberia elections started in 1847.
Hold on, Mr. Sharif. We have some Tabata here from our viewers. Darling Wall will say, my Tabata of this week is the disgraced PLP leader talking vision of Liberia, the vision he saw while in prison. You come and watch the show. I'm going to have a Dr. Cassell here on Wednesday. So come and watch the show. Lucini Sako say Matabata is Boakai's silence on many national issues.
True. It's true. Like where is he now? Okay. So anyway,
Mr. Boakai was in Buchanan with the Liberty Party, or the Yombly faction of the Liberty Party, when they were doing the fundraiser, and he gave them good money. And that was a slap in the face to those who believe that Mr. Boakai has been living on loans. Papa Showdown, in case you don't know. Wanda Massacre, Matabata is government of George Weah needs to come to an end. All right, go ahead, Mr. Sharif.
Yeah, so I started by saying that the Liberian multi-party election, two-party democracy with two-party elections, started back in 1847. And so as imperfect as that was, it was a very imperfect system. It was an exclusive system, if you will. At the time, women didn't vote. At the time, other citizens didn't have access to the ballot. As imperfect as it was, that could have been built upon. There were a lot of things that occur. As I mentioned, incumbents were defeated. 3 times incumbents were defeated. 2 of them, of course, was James Briggs, and the other was Daniel B. Warner. So Liberia could have built upon what was laid down, the foundation that was laid down in 1847. But instead, what happened starting in 1943, 1944, William V. S. Tubman, you had a destruction of that democratic process. You had an annihilation of that democratic process, wherein a one-man rule was institutionalized. So this one man had no opposition. So in the end, when Tauber took over, that institutionalization of the one-man rule continued during the Tauber era. Although he tried to liberalize, but it was too late. So no, our democracy started with independence. It was very imperfect, I must admit, but it started back then. So what you see now were foundations that were laid down back then. And I think that it should be strengthened and not weakened. And one of the ways to strengthen it is to strengthen the hands of the National Elections Commission. George Weah has no interest in doing that, and he has to be forced. As we all know, George Weah, he has to be forced. He was forced by the United States, get this, to do something about his corrupt officials. So again, I think he needs to be forced. He's going to be forced, unfortunately, by the Americans again, which is really unfortunate. I think every one of us need to come together. We all need to be talking about this. The opposition needs to be a part and parcel of this, and not just wait for some superpower to tell them what to do.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it was last week. Last week was Mr. Cooney's birthday. Uh, Mr. Cooney, this is your post birthday. Welcome to the show and happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
Oh,
Your closing comments.
Well, Dennis, again, thank you for the show. Personally, I have a vested interest in clean election and free and fair election. Um, and that interest may be a little bit selfish, but it is what it is. I do believe that the president will win a second term, and I want the president victory to be untainted. And this is why I'm employing everybody, even people in the opposition, to watch this process, because the opposition are putting up any fight. I know what the fallback position would be. So we as a government, we also have an interest to make sure that the process is as transparent as it can be. And all of us must watch the election commission, call the election commission to order when things are not going properly, because we believe that the president will win a very free and fair elections, and we don't want anything that would taint that victory. Therein lies our, if you will call it, maybe selfishness, but it is for the national good. We have to have clean and fair election in our country, and the government and the political parties, they all need to make sure that the process is free, so that the victory of the winner, which I'm hoping will be my president, which I believe will be my president, will not be tainted with all kinds of unnecessary cries and unnecessary protests and other situations. So we need to discuss this whole election roadmap every time we get, as we go to 2023, as part our little contribution to that national endeavor. I want to thank my colleagues for their views, as usual, for their participation, and it was nice being here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Coney. And as usual, the CDC Pape got some commendations from the callers. So thank you. Let's go to Madame Gonglo White for your closing comments, man.
Okay, let me just say thank you again to Mr. Jai and all of the panelists for this very great and critical discussion. This is about our country. Election matters are no easy matters. In fact, I am a clear victim of uh, fraudulent elections that start with a very questionable, process and activities. And like Kuni said, the elections are won long before the election day. Because of the experience that I have had in series of the elections that I've participated in, the fraud started from the very get-go, but uh, we didn't have the resources to man the various places that these processes were taking place, and therefore we were caught off guard. In the end, it was too late to question, even though we did, but we came out the way it came out. So I would like to again call on all of the political parties and candidates to ensure that they start to talk about the elections right now, because it has started. It's time to question the timetable, the unrealistic timetable. This is time to question them and actually bring, the government feet to fire. I like to say, as I go towards my ending, that this is why we keep talking about uh, Councillor Tiawan Gonglo being the best fit, because you need somebody who has the political will to do what is right and keep this country in the right direction. We need people who will go beyond self. And Councillor Gonglo has stood the test of time. He's a man who is beyond self. He's a man who like he always says, he's for two C's. He's loyal to his country and his conscience. We need people who are loyal to their country and their conscience and making sure that the right things are done. Our democracy is strengthening, and we believe that Councillor Congo has all of what it takes to strengthen our democratic process. If it is under Councillor Congo leadership, you would not have it almost close to defunded election commission. This is like defunding the election commission because you don't believe in democracy. You believe in autocracy. You want to stay there forever. This is what this government is doing. But I think the opposition should not remain like a sleeping lion. It's time for them to wake up and be a part of the process and question every step of the way.
Madam Gonglowa, before you end, there's a question here for you from Johnny. It's a quick question to Edith. Will you run again?
I'll leave that question to the future.
No. Mr. Salif, you got the last word.
It's a very political answer, man.
All I have to do is to ask the question.
Yes, yeah. So thank you. Like, I want to re-echo what my colleagues, the co-panelists have said. It's a great show. Let's continue on this subject. Elections, free and fair election and good election results on election day, past election day, has variables. And some of these variables, as I keep saying each time I had the opportunity here, good legal framework. Let's follow the legal framework, the election laws of Liberia. A good, efficient electoral management body, which is our National Elections Commission in our case, and electoral rights, the rights of voters, rights of candidates, rights of media, rights of civil society to access and have information, right to open budget election financing, right? Voter registration, transparent one, ballot access, campaign, a good, vibrant campaign process, political parties, step up your game, media access, voter process, role of official counting of election. And I think that the timetable is incomplete. Although you can't predict when the results will be announced finally, you should have some kind of time frame for when results ought to be known, within when results ought to be known, past election counting. So I want to say we have a lot of subtopics and themes that we could explore, and yeah, these appeals and registration, and so this is just part of the legal framework kind of thing that I'm talking about, the rule of law, so to speak, around election. But I'm talking about counting the votes,
post-election
part
day.
of timetable, and then pronouncement of results. One may say, oh, but you don't know, they may go to the Supreme Court and whatever. You can't tell when that will happen, but at least have some kind of sense of when can we have closure from beginning to end of the whole entire electoral roadmap. So thank you again, Dennis, and look forward to more opportunities in the near future.
Thank you. And I was hoping too that in a way, the Election Commission add debate and also primary. Let's do something before have a period for primary, even if nobody is doing it, even if they will do coronation. Let's add something there. But
You
again,
should have
thank
a
you.
debate commission, a national presidential debate commission, not
Right.
election commission itself that can
Except, and yeah, we need something like that. We couldn't just leave these things with chance and you have such a short time allotted for all these activities to take place. There's no reason for this kind of crunch if we have 6 years to prepare for it. Maybe we can do a dig hole, cover hole again, to economics
Yeah.
as we call it here, and take some money from somewhere. Maybe Mr. Kuni may agree that maybe we cut down some of the county tour money or some of the money spent on cars and the constituency fees and the
Travels.
cars, those kind of things. We may have. I have a very a good idea, like these crowded ministries, right? People go there, you have even no seat. Office of have 20 people, you actually have 10 or maybe 5 persons working. Those other people can stay home and work the next day. Maybe you have 2 days of work and 3 days, instead of burning all the fuel and doing all these things. But again, thank you so much. The discussion on election continues. And hopefully we may not have this every week, but every time it's going to continue up to October 10, 2023, because we need to talk about elections, until we have another system that can replace election. This is all we have to determine our leaders. You know, gone are the days where we have, you know, chiefs ruling forever. And by the way, the Queen of England passed away, rest in peace. And that's a system that they kept in place for all this long. If we have another system to replace what we have now, the elections, maybe you can make me king. Until then, we have election, and that's what we're using. And so we should make sure that they are held, democratic elections are held, and that we all play a role in ensuring that some say young democracy, I say old democracy, survive and is sustained through elections. Have a good night. And we end with our song that says, what are you support?
Before we end, I just want to clarify, when you mentioned about the Queen, I was laughing. It was not at the Queen. I was looking at something that made me laugh, so that nobody thinks that you mentioned about death and I'm laughing. I just, realized.
Edith, I like Edith is such a careful politician, right?
Yes,
she
I like that.
image and everything. I mean, she's meticulous. Wow, wow. We gotta carry you again.
Look at. Carry me where? You carried me before.
No, we'll carry you this time.
Okay,
I'll go back there and register to vote.
I think I was starting my campaign as senator for Nimba.
You're not gonna win, man. Stay right here.
I said Edith should mentor Swakoko Dennis. That would be my the admiration Sheriff is throwing at you. I'm like, we need more of Edith Gonglo where.
Okay, let's go to the song. These guys are going
to whether you going to support either in the next election or not, whether you support Boakai, Cummings, or
support Gonglo.
Or
let's have a good national.
Whoever you support, we are all Liberians.
And I know Kony himself believes that. He may not say because he doesn't want his sedition.
We're going to charge the Gonglo team.
When you open a hard now, he wished that one Gonglo can become president tomorrow.
On that note,
we are one round.
Let's end with our song that says we are all Liberians.
We are one round.
We are Liberians. Liberia is